It's Aiden with Tales of Unruined Lives. I take a little break from my podcast because I just graduated and started a new career. But recently, I interviewed a man who's a true testament to the fact that your life cannot be ruined. As long as you keep going, keep trying, and believe in yourself, life has so much to offer us. Stay tuned for this mostly unedited video interview of a former bank robber who's turned into a motivational speaker, an author, and a father. This is a true testament to what I keep telling you all. Life cannot be ruined. Stay tuned for this interview. I really think it will help so many people. So here we are with today's guest. This is Don Cummins. He is a recovering addict or addict in recovery, recovered addict. He is an author and a motivational speaker. Is that right?
From time to time, yes, I do some motivational speaking. I
Very
do.
cool. Very cool. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about your story? Your struggle with incarceration, addiction, and what ultimately inspired you to begin your journey in sobriety?
Sure. Well, to begin with, I'll just give a high level view, and then we can dig into any like specific questions about all that. But when growing up, I faced a set of difficulties, not unlike many people who wind up in prison and addiction. I suffered some trauma, and I was exposed to some things that I probably should not have been. And I had a good family who loved me, but they were in the same boat that I ultimately wound up in ways. And I just remember from the age of around like 9 and 10 feeling very uncomfortable in my own skin. I felt like I just wanted to escape and I felt afraid. And I wasn't sure what I was afraid of. I wasn't doing well in school and I started running away from home. And when I discovered weed, I started smoking weed. And within a couple of years, by the age of 13, my life had gone downhill so fast that, I had been transferred to a few different schools for possession of drugs. I was, gone from home for days and things got really bad and my parents were scared, and they had kind of cleaned up by then. And they turned to religion, to help them get clean and to kind of build a new life. And but anyway, they wanted to help me, and so they thought that the way to help me would be to commit me to an inpatient drug program when I was 13 years old. And I had no idea I was going there. I thought I was going to school number three.
Mm.
And so it was called Straight Incorporated. It was in the Tampa Bay area of Florida, and they've since been shut down because of abuse and all kinds of horrific kind of stories, but I went there and I ran away 10 times and I began stealing bicycles or cars or whatever I could to get away from that place and go back home to my neighborhood, which was Safety Harbor, Florida. It was a small town in the Tampa Bay area.
Actually, I've been there.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Um, and I just wanted to go home, and I wanted to straighten out, but I didn't know how to do that. I didn't realize that I was compelled to use and that I was so uncomfortable inside that I was driven to seek a solution from outside of myself. I didn't understand the things that you come to learn in recovery. And so, I started going to a juvenile detention center, and I kept going, and it would get worse every time. I would go to a youth program, and then I would go to a youth kind of place that was far away and more secure and more secure. And finally, I was sent to the Okeechobee Boys School when I was 15 for the second time. I went when I was 14 too, and I escaped and I stole some cars and all that stuff. And I got in a big pile up in I-75 around Gainesville. And anyway, the short version is they certified me as an adult when I was 15 years old, and they sent me to prison. And I went through the gates at an adult prison at age 16. And so it was quite the experience. It was traumatic. I was afraid, and I think that through prison I learned how to be a chameleon. I learned how to use whatever savvy I could to kind of navigate through situations, whether it was being funny or I play guitar, so that was always a plus. I could always get into a band and that dude's cool, leave him alone, and that kind of thing. And anyway, I eventually got out, and it was more of the same. I just kept going back to drugs and the cycle, and to make a long story short, I wound up doing over 20 years in prison for bank robberies. And I got out, and that's thinking that cocaine was my problem, and that if I could just stop using cocaine, everything would be good. I,
Mhm.
I stayed fit while I was in prison, and I got out, and I was going to get a job. I was going to get a girlfriend. I was going to get married, have kids. I was going to be successful. I was going to be a record producer. I was going to do all these things, and I was creative, and I had a lot of potential, but I started smoking weed and then smoking crack again, and I robbed another bank. And so, fortunately, this time around, they recognized that I had some mental health issues. I was just like on a 3-day run and just incoherent when I got busted, and they put me in an outpatient residential program that was centered around mental health and supporting people with those issues. And they had come a long way, not where they should be, but they came a long way since I had been like 15 and 16. And they started taking us to recovery meetings, and I got familiar with. I went to Narcotics Anonymous and other 12-step meetings, and I had this awakening kind of at a 12-step workshop one day, and I was able to have a breakthrough that enabled me to finally reach out for help. It didn't solve all my problems, but I just got in touch with my own self-worth sufficiently to call a sponsor when I felt like using, and to do the things that people had advised me to do, but I just felt incapable of doing. Up to that point, it had been like when the desire to use hit me, when I got $10 in my hand. Just the reality, just to be raw, uh, my stomach would start doing flips, and my knees would almost start knocking, and I would like have to take a shit because I my body knew what was coming, and I get emotional when I talk about it, but I'll never forget the first time that feeling hit me again, when I was at the homeless shelter for like 20th time. And I had some money, I had some resources, just a little bit, but enough to walk a block and get high. And I remembered, call your sponsor. And I did. And that was such a big help to me. And I knew at that point that the game had changed, and I started building a life. And um, so I've been in recovery for my 12th year now, and life is good. And I can't believe, I literally can't believe, when I look back, I can't believe that was me compared to the me that is now. Yet there's still a lot of more work to do, But so, like in a nutshell, that's my story, and we can go from there.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Um, I can relate to a lot of like those feelings that you mentioned. I guess a couple of the things I picked up on where you were saying like, you were young and your parents wanted to help and you were put into these different programs that you think somebody might think like this would help, this would get you in the right direction or whatever. Do you think that like not understanding why, like your behavior yourself, like you mentioned, like you didn't understand why you were doing these things, do you think that prevented you from entering into recovery sooner?
Yes, I think that, everybody has their own path. I just know with me, I felt like I was so damaged, and not just from trauma and the things that I experienced up to that age, but it was just like a mindset. I just really believed deeply that I was different and that people wouldn't understand me. And so I couldn't trust anyone to like reveal who I was, And I just I didn't understand addiction, that it was a thing, and that I was an addict, and that there was this dynamic within me, that would just, compel me to use against my will when I really didn't want to, And it's amazing you can go so long without really seeing, hey, that's what it is. And really, I deserve recovery. I'm a good person at heart, and I deserve to recover just as much as anyone else. And I'm worth the struggle that it will take to do the work, to do the inward work, to to make the changes I need to have the life I deserve. So um, yeah, I think I would have responded a lot better. I don't know if it would have worked, but um, if they had taken the time to explain to me, hey Don, we see that you're really struggling, and um, drugs are really not helpful to you at all, and we want to get you some help. And we're going to go there. If we don't see some changes, what can we do to help you? But that conversation never happened. And I came from a family who didn't talk about things.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned that, your first time in treatment was a surprise to you, you
yeah.
you thought you were just going to school that day. And I can imagine that kind of has an impact on your ability to trust as well. Things that happen throughout our childhood, you trust your parents first, and
Mhm,
not saying that they were wrong in what they did, but
mhm.
that could definitely cause some issues with trust. And like you said, there was no preparation for you either. So
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
imagine that was a little bit of a shock. And I had my fair share of, treatment facilities that I went to. And I hate to say like they didn't work, because each place I learned something that did eventually help me in my recovery when I was ready to go there myself. So
Yeah.
it might have been like a horrible facility that really had not much to offer, but there was at least one thing that I can remember from each place that I went to, whether a jail or a rehab, that offered me something, at least.
I would agree with that. There's something you can glean from all those experiences that there's a lesson in it. And
Even if
sometimes
you don't realize it until years later.
that's right. Yeah, agreed.
So you mentioned your journey with prison started pretty young at 16.
Mhm.
Um, I can only imagine how hard that was. I was a month after 18 when I was arrested. So I was young as well, but I was an adult. I had a friend who I met in jail, who was incarcerated prior. She was my age, but she had already been to prison and gotten out at 16. She was, in prison, and she had told me some real horror stories from that. Um, so I can only imagine how difficult that was at such a young age. Um, in speaking of prison, the book that you wrote, The Prison Within, um, what does the prison within mean to you? You've had such a long journey with prison. I can only imagine how it must feel like a big part of like your story and who you are, and like how do you separate yourself from that, or do you separate yourself from that?
Yeah. Well, I guess first the book, The Prison Within, and then the subtitle is a memoir of breaking free. I I learned kind of the real long and hard way that the walls that held me back from being truly happy and experiencing love and connection and good things in my life. It really wasn't the prison walls. That wasn't the problem with me. And I'm not saying that it would have been a struggle to be happy and experience love and connection and the things that I wanted in life within the walls, the literal walls of a prison. Because some people manage to do that. They manage to find a place within themselves of peace, and they have a practice, and they want more, obviously. But with me, I was always looking forward to things are going to be great when I get out, you know, and that is the solution to get out, and then I'll finally be free. And um, when I finally did it after that last stretch, I did 15 straight in the Florida Department of Corrections, and I got out, and um, I pretty much was set up in my situation. I things have changed with my family, and they were able to put me up and set me up with a laptop, and I found a job right away, and I was set up right away with the things that I needed to be successful in the world and society and so forth. But um, the prison within remained with me. It didn't leave me the day I got out, and I remember, and I talk about this in the book a little bit, but just simple things like going to the grocery store. When I started shopping for myself, I'd go to the grocery store. I go to Publix, which is right nearby, and I felt really good going in there the first time. Like I'm a normal citizen. And I'm walking in there, shopping, and I would experience a feeling of dread come over me because I saw the other people and I thought, I'm not like them. I'm not a real shopper. I'm not part of the shopping community. I'm different. And I felt like I was a fake and like I was an imposter, like I was pretending that I was normal and in there just shopping like anybody else. But I was, I'm just getting food like everybody else. And it was a real trip, to go and be part of different kind of communities, whether it's my work community when I got a job, shopping, or I tried to make friends a few times. I was just not good at it. I was very reserved and afraid to be assertive and now if the situation was flipped and I was in prison, I would know right when to be assertive, because I had to for my survival. But this was a whole different game, and I didn't know how to function. And so I became depressed, and I just turned inward and started drinking and smoking weed and the crack, like I said. And it was all self-imposed, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't know why I was so afraid, really. I experienced it, I felt it, but I was not able to reflect on it and see it in enough time to give me like a little pause to make a different decision. I didn't know how to walk up to say, "Hey, my name's Don," and just smile and like many people do who um, push through those things. And I just didn't know. I didn't have any tools. And so I really needed recovery. And I'm so grateful that recovery gave me that. So
Yeah, I remember when I first was released, I would get so nauseous every time before I left my house because I was scared that people would know that I'm like just out of jail. Like they would know that um I this is my first time at the store. Or they would know that I just don't belong. And like in that situation, I would get so sick to my stomach. Um, Anytime I would leave the house for probably like 6 months after I got out, it was just like so weird for me to be part of society again. And then, like you said, making friends, like making eye contact with people, like, yeah, no. It was a while before I made any new friends in my recovery after being released. So I can relate to that as well. And it kind of goes with like imposter syndrome, like you feel like you don't belong, and like self-loathing and just, yeah, like you said, feeling like you're not supposed to be there, like you're not really like one of them, you're different.
yeah.
Um, and it's okay to be different, but everybody wants to be part of a community as well. And
Mm.
um what strategies helped you overcome, that imposter syndrome? Like, how did you find your community and how
Mm.
did you feel comfortable in your community?
Um, for me, that community was the 12-step community. And I'm not saying that it has to be that for everybody. Everybody has their own path. But for me, um, in terms of strategy, I would have to say that I in the beginning I didn't have a strategy. I just was desperate enough to finally do what some people advised me uh, strongly to do. And um, I I trusted that they had the answer that I needed because they had been clean for a long time. And I finally was convinced that they were very similar to me. And not all of them had been to prison. Some had, but when you got right down to it, they suffered from the same self-centered fear that I did, and they were wounded like I was, and they had learned how to work with that, and experience some goodness in their life anyway. And I was very desperate at the beginning, and I would take a bus. I was at the homeless shelter, and I would take a bus to go do step work with my sponsor several times a week, and I would go to meetings every day, and I just it gave me a place, a community that was not super huge, but big enough to like watch people and how they do things, to make some friends because we have something in common to begin with, and there's no question about that. And I did, and I started making some friends, and I learned how to talk to people, and learned how to make mistakes in front of people and not run away and ghost because I fucked up in some way, and that feeling, that that was critical for me to feel like I was connected to people. And then we would do things like, I don't know, recovery movie night, skating, just stuff that I never went to high school, because of my story, and things that kind of helped me make up for some of that and kind of integrate with other people. Man, that was so huge to me. And you know, when I think back on that time, I get emotional because I was so full of hope, because I finally believed that it was possible for me to break that cycle, and so I would say, that as far as the strategy goes, that kind of developed, and I didn't know what growth mindset was. I didn't know any real, I didn't know what to call the tools I was learning at first, just tool number one was picking up the phone and going to a meeting, and that developed into some other things that I could practice on my own without, just being so dependent on other people to help me manage my life, and so those things were really huge. And um, but the core of it, I think, is I had to trust, on that level, and I had to. Um, that was my big strategy in the beginning, and it still is on some level.
Um, Sounds like 12 step has been a really big part of your recovery. Are you still active in 12 step meetings?
No,
No.
and not entirely. I'm not. I mean, I every once in a while I'll go to one, and where I'm at now, I live in Durango, Colorado, and we have what's called an all recovery meeting, and it's just for anybody who's in recovery, and it's different, but there's some similarities, and it's mainly the fellowship and being able to talk about what you're going through, and there's other people with experience, and it's not defined in the same way with steps like that. And I find, and I still do find, the principles of the steps very relevant to my life, and I'm so clean. If anybody's watching that knows me and is wondering, I'm very grateful for, my family. I'm married and I have two kids now, and that's um, I mean, my wife's in recovery too, and my kids are not, but just being connected to people that I love and that love me, and having that in a healthy way is it goes a long way in keeping me grounded, and so that's a long answer to, are you still going into 12 step things? But
Yeah. I, for me, 12 step was one of those things that was like not helpful at the time. And then I found my own path, and then certain things from 12 step meetings and my NA big book, they helped me. I still have my big book. And
Mhm.
uh so I think that it's a really amazing program. It's helped so many people. So many people have found recovery through the 12 steps. So I think that's amazing. But for me, it's something that I actually do once a year
Mhm.
on my clean date. I try to go
Yeah.
as just like a reminder of like how far I've come, and that each year is a
So,
big deal, even though you've got, like you said, you have 12 years.
mhm.
I have 11. In May, if I stay sober, I'll have 12.
Congratulations. Yeah.
So yeah, I plan on going, and it's cool for me. I don't like to speak a lot, and then I will, get my key tag at the end, and then I'll try to share a little bit, but I don't know, it's just cool to have that like recognition. Like this is a big deal. Like it is a hard thing.
Yes.
And when you tell those people in the room that you have 10, 11, 12 years sober, they're all like, "Whoa, how? Tell me how." And like that's just a cool feeling. Like that makes me emotional to think about.
Totally.
Sharing your story and hearing other people share their stories, it's important. And like you, and that's like what a community is, that fellowship. So like even if it's not NA or a 12-step program or the meeting, the all recovery meeting, there's all different types of fellowship, or if you can just like share your story, you can help so many people and you help yourself. Every time
Yeah.
I do one of these interviews, I feel like I heal myself a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I get that. I would never want to tell somebody don't go to a 12 step because I would want to encourage them to go to try it out. But I just the reason I kind of stopped going is I felt like the identification was not the same as it once was. I stopped viewing myself as an addict, per se. I viewed myself as a person who um, just experienced what I experienced, and it didn't mean that I thought I can control my using. I'm not like looking for an excuse to go drink or to smoke. I don't. I'm clean, but I just didn't want to label myself that way, and I didn't feel comfortable doing that because kind of like growth mindset type stuff. I just don't think
I
of myself that way.
absolutely agree. I do not like to call myself an addict. I'll say I'm recovered. I used to be an addict. That's just my personal thing. I know that might offend some people or that's not what they believe, but me personally, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Like I don't want to call myself an addict or an ex-con. Like I'm not those things. I am a graduate. I am I'm a government employee. Like I am a stepmother. Like these are things that I am now today. So I
Yeah,
don't like using those terms either. Like
yeah,
so I get that. Um let me see. Oh, you mentioned the growth mindset. I want to talk more about that,
sure.
what that means to you, and how people can see these like failures as opportunities for growth and how they can appreciate their own growth. Like, I feel like sometimes people don't notice they're growing when
Mm,
you are. And I think it's so important to be proud of yourself and to notice that you're growing.
mm. Yeah, well, first to me, a growth mindset is it's a way of looking at things that expects to have failures. It's there's not this idea that everything's going to be perfect and it's going to be easy, but that that the struggle in getting wherever you're aiming for is worth it, and that each failure is a learning experience, and people who are hugely successful in many different areas, not just like financially or whatever, know this through experience that you don't get anywhere without making mistakes along the way. And what I had to learn for myself is to practice some self acceptance and forgiveness when I made mistakes. And it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean, oh damn, I screwed up. I look like a fool. That just shows me how how untalented I am because I didn't have the smarts to make this or that work, and all those kind of things, and um, but thinking that way is not, it doesn't come natural. It's something for a lot of people it doesn't. For me, it didn't. I have to work at that, and I still have to work at it. I do things, and I fuck up like left and right sometimes. At things, whether I miscommunicate to somebody at work or at home, or I shattered the windshield of my wife's car the other day because I was trying to fix something. And anyway, long story, but that's what I did. And I thought, like, my first thought, after 12 years, my first thought is, I'm such a fucking loser. It was my first thought. I mean, immediately I was like, not no, and I'm not even going to go there. But I was so disappointed because I wanted to do a good thing. I wanted to fix something and surprise her, and I broke her car. So which is fixed now. I got that taken care of. One of the good things about recovery, I some stuff put away for emergencies, but the growth mindset, I found that I really needed other people to help me cultivate that. And back then we didn't call it growth mindset. That's a term I learned later. But like for example, so I did all that time for bank robbery, and I got clean, and I wound up getting an entry level software development job, and I worked my way. It was at a startup, and I worked my way all the way up to being the director of software development, and we made banking software. So that's pretty crazy, and but I remember at work, I would always go through this thing where my sponsor had to talk me off the ledge. Like I would think that they're going to fire me any day. They're going to, and here I am, I'm starting here, then I go there, then I go there, then I go there. And the whole time I'm still thinking that they don't really like me. They don't, I knew better than that. But there was still this thing in me that would tell myself that kind of thing. And I was so grateful that I had someone I could confide in with that type of thing. And, you know, um, and I pushed through that, and I don't like need someone to talk to as much as I used to about that, because it's kind of become habit now. Um, that positive things lay ahead of me if I'm willing to do the work, and that I am smart enough, capable enough, got what it takes, and all of those kind of things. And also when I fail to just get back up and learn the lesson, and go ahead and be flexible. You know, I personally tend to get very fixated in how things are supposed to be. If I got a goal, I see it in my mind, and it has to be that way, and the path to getting there has to be as I imagined it. And actually, might be another way. And being open to that helps me get where I want to be. Um, much more than being rigid in my thinking and stuff. So. Um, to me, the growth mindset piece is just it's a habit that I have to build and grow. And I mean, there's a lot of good books on growth mindset and how to think about things, but I found for me, especially with the separation and the alienation I felt, especially early in recovery, that having a person I could talk to about those kind of things was extremely helpful. Um, so yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
So I really wanted to get to a couple more points. I wanted to talk about how awesome it was to vote, and like getting these rights back. Like, do you feel like that vote, the right to vote, increase your self-worth? Like, do you think being like helping society, like going to work, do you think doing these things all eventually like build you up? Because that's how I feel. I feel like each good thing I do pushes out like those bad things that I've done in a way. It's like we talked about before, like I'm not an addict, I am this now. Like
Mhm.
the recent thing. So like voting for me was so cool because it's something that I was told I can't do. And
Mhm.
look at me, now I did it. And it's also like, okay, I don't have to say I can't vote because I'm a felon. I can say I voted because I'm a voter. Um, I don't really know how to explain like how powerful that was, but it was one of the first things you asked me, and I thought that was really cool. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I want to hear how you feel about that. And then I
Mhm.
also want to hear if you could give one piece of advice to someone newly sober or just released from prison, if they're afraid, how can they overcome that fear, and what advice do you wish you had? So the power of voting and the happiness of that, and then like the advice for someone fearful.
Yeah. Well, real quick, like one of the first things my sponsor told me when I first started going to meetings is to share every meeting, raise my hand, And the only thing I was, I'm not going to say allowed to say, but what he encouraged me to say is, I'm Don, and today I have a choice. Thank you for letting me share. And that was it. And so that, that piece there, to have a choice about, who governs, and to have a right to do that. And for so long I knew that I didn't, because that's how it was in Florida, right? And you know that. And when that changed and I was able to vote, I just really felt, I'm not going to say that it like made me feel whole on some level, because I feel like I had learned by then that I was, no matter what I felt or no matter what I thought, my wholeness was not related to those types of things. It was my inherent self-worth, right? But um, it was an amazing experience to go cast a vote and to put that sticker on my chest, which I did, and to take a selfie with that and send it to my mom and some people that I loved, to be part of, in that kind of sense. I legally and officially was a part of, and once and for all. And just thought that was great, um, and I advise anyone in Florida or elsewhere that has not yet voted but can, go for it. And the ex-felons. But um, so that, and do I have enough time for the advice still?
Yeah, we have 3
Okay.
minutes.
Okay. Um, I you know my advice would be to trust the process. And what I mean by that is, um, to the degree that you can, whatever your spiritual, religious, what your philosophical background is to spend some time thinking about the fact that there is a process working within each one of us to grow and to become more than we were, even if it doesn't feel like it, and to trust that there's some principle that will take you where you want to go, and just listen for that, and to practice the best you can, getting still every day and watching your thoughts and observing your emotions come up, and it's called mindfulness.
Yes.
Getting in a habit of seeing that, which will create the space you need to make a different decision when those feelings or those thoughts or those fears come up. Um, there's a lot of different ways that people get to that quiet space, and you got to find it. It's there for you. There's a life that awaits you, that calls to you, and you're worth it. And don't let anyone tell you different. You can do this. And I would say that's the heart of it, really. And how that plays out for different people is different. But that's the essence of it for
I
me.
like I like that a lot. And I also like what you said about, the inherent self-worth. It's not, you don't have to, like I was saying, I do these things to push those bad things I've done down. I don't have to do that to amplify my self-worth. I do that for me. And,
Mhm.
it makes me feel good. But like, yeah, your worth is not based upon what you do. Or what you've done. So I liked how you said that inherent self-worth. Um, and like I feel like everybody's life has a worth, is worth something. And yeah, it's worth it to keep going. It's worth it to keep trying, and you're worth it to keep trying. So I really did like that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for this interview today. Yeah, this was great. I really appreciate you. You shared some really insightful experiences, all kinds of advice, and I think that this will be really helpful for a lot of people.
Good. Well, thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure being here.
No, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Take care.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in. I hope you enjoyed listening to Don Cummins as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. If you'd like to hear more about his story, I've included the link to his book in the description below, as well as the links to all of the facts I included in this video. If you have any other questions or comments, please comment below, like, and subscribe.